Hello and welcome to Outlaw Bookseller. My name is Stephen E. Andrews and I'm a writer, bookseller, collector and occasional psychogeographer. Although I say I'm originally from Pontypridd, I was actually born at Groeswen-Holt, which is a small hamlet of just a few cottages which sat beside a former railway halt. The railway closed in 1957 to passengers and 1965 to freight. I was born in 1963 and have no memory of it. It was of course victim of the beaching cuts. So when I say I'm from Pontypridd, I really feel like I was an outsider there as well, even though that's where I spend a lot of my formative time. And today I'm going to revisit that in an autobiogeography and look specifically at a certain place where I feel my imagination was truly born. So today we're looking at the psychogeography of Mill Street, Pontypridd. Groeswen-Holt sits at the foot of a mountain called Mynydd Mayo, in between Pontypridd and Caerphilly. So it's a borderland between two valleys, two different towns. Above where I lived, at Crossroads, Groeswen-Holt, there's another mountain called Llanover Arms. So describing where I come from is based on the past, on a location of coal levels and a train which hasn't run for nearly 60 years. So I come from a liminal space, somewhere neither here nor there, but very specifically a place of its own. I'm tired, I rose early, it's time for coffee. So what is psychogeography? It's a word that's bandied around a lot. It has a vague meaning. If you look at the root, psyche, the soul, the spirit, geography, the place, it's clearly about the interaction between human consciousness and the spirit of place. If there's a lot of history which is accepted and consensual, then it becomes a collective unconscious memory, a Jungian thing. I see it more as a personal thing. Directly opposite me is the Prince of Wales, which is now a Wetherspoon pub, and which used to be a cinema that in my youth seemed to show exclusively nothing but softcore porn films. One night they showed 5 spaghetti westerns, including 2 of the Sabata films. And that's the only time I can remember the programme as reading as anything different. Today this part of Cardiff is being developed almost beyond recognition of my youth. This huge tower has sprung up in no time. So things change, and we as people change. Internally, memories remain. But memories, reminiscences, transmute over time with retelling into fiction. This doesn't matter. Truth is subjective and personal. Facts are objective and concrete and provable. What really matters is story. So, here we are in Pontypridd, market town situated at the confluence of the Rhondda and Taff rivers and their associated valleys. This is just outside the station. This is the area known as the Tumble, which is a crossroads. And directly in front of the screen now I'm finding this very disorienting. I haven't been here for 8 years, and you can see that church spire, and across the road there used to be a huge building, an Art Deco cinema called the County, which closed down as a cinema in the 80s. And it's just really strange to me. I've seen pictures online that it's gone. It was demolished recently. Nobody knows what's going to go there instead. But it's something that loomed over the entire town all my life, and it's really, really strange to see it gone. So this is the Tumble, and across the road there's a pub called the Skinny Dog. When I was a kid, and until the time I left home in the mid-80s, that was a pub called the Greyhound, and it was like a real old men's pub with boxing prints on the wall, had bags of character. I think I only ever drank in it once. And over here we have the Broadway leading down to Treforest, and that tunnel there leads to the Graig. I'm just going to cross over the road to where the county was until recently. One of the strangest things about my memories of Pontypridd, and I lived here until 1985, so 22 years, is that I can only ever remember going in the county cinema once. Now I know I went in it several times, but I've only got one memory. And it's amazing, there used to be this huge white edifice here, and as I say, my only memory of the county really is going to see the film When Dinosaurs Ruled the Earth in October and November 1970. So I was seven and a half, and it was, I think, an A, and so technically I wasn't allowed in, but I wanted to see it because I was a dinosaur nut, and my mum asked the manager and I was allowed to accompany her. And it was a Hammer film, quasi-sequel to 1 Million Years BC, with stop frame animation by Jim Danforth, and it was based on a screenplay by a screen treatment by J.G. Ballard. And in the credits he's credited as J.B. Ballard, so that was my first exposure to Ballard without even realising it. And he wasn't very happy with the film, and but I loved it. And what was interesting was that, as I say, it was an A, I think, and there was a nude scene where Victoria Vetri, the star, has her fur bikini stripped off, and a few of us guys from school got to see it. I mean, very young, as I say, but whenever you saw the film on TV, that scene was always excised. So years later I managed to get a Blu-ray where that was back in it, the uncut version. I wasn't sure if this passage would still be here. It leads down into Taft Street, the main street of Pontypridd, which is at the main drag, and it's right by the side of where the county was, so I'm glad to see it's still here. I could sort of approach Mill Street, the place I want to focus on today, directly off Taft Street, but I feel the need to approach it elliptically because it's kind of where my imagination began, and I can't confront it directly. I need to look at it from a different angle first. And be more comfortable with that. It's very hard to explain what I mean, but because I know it's changed so much, I need to take a different angle of approach. The big building ahead used to be the AU Union building. I'm not sure what it is now. And here, this little sort of hair salon on the corner. I remember this was the first ever video library I came across, and it was before I had a video recorder and video player, and it was quite short-lived. And I remember that in the window, which obviously has changed now, they had a video cassette called Red Tape, which I think was a magazine. It was a sort of porno magazine on tape, and it was a precursor of Electric Blue, which was a lot more famous years later. And Red Tape, of course, with its references to bureaucracy, conjured up certain images. And I don't know whether the cassette was red. I think coloured VHS cassettes came in later on, but red tape. So this was the first video library I came across, and the first video cassette I saw in a window was a pornographic one. That tells you everything about the interface between technology and desire. The only whole decade that I lived in South Wales was the 70s, as I was born in 63, left Pontypridd in 85. Of course, when one is young and inexperienced, one falls in love many times, as one does. And I had a particular penchant for a young lady who was in school with me for 5 years in secondary school, same class, and she asked me out actually in the first year, and I was too shy to sort of say anything. And then a couple of years later I asked her out, and it never happened. And I'm not going to name her, I haven't seen her since I was about 18, but I'm going to show you a picture of the TV star Anita Carey, a very 70s lady, and she looked rather like this. In Bristol the other day I talked about Brunel a lot, and of course, because he worked a lot on the railways, engineering, that railway viaduct there ahead of us, which leads us up into the valleys. Pontypridd divides into the Cynon and Rhondda valleys, and that's one of the rail lines going up that way now. And this is the Rhondda River flowing underneath Taff Street. And the sort of concrete structure there, I can remember when that wasn't there. When I was about 3 to 5 years old, that was just a bridge, and there was a railing, you'd walk across it. So I remember those shops when they were brand new. As the river heads underneath Taff Street, underneath that building and the bridge, it meets the River Taff, which flows down from Merthyr Tydfil. And that of course is the reason why Pontypridd this year is a market town, the confluence of the two rivers. Okay, this plaque here commemorates Evan James and his son James James, and they composed the Welsh national anthem, Hen Vlad Vain Hadau, Land of My Fathers, which most Welshmen sort of mumble. We all know the melody, but very few of us know the words in Welsh, and it's kind of sort of an embarrassed mumble, and that's a fairly new sign. The one I remember is this old, rather small, subtle one. Renewed and repositioned. Oh, okay, so maybe I'm wrong. Renewed. There was a different one here. So this is where the national anthem was written. In my time in Pontypridd, it was all about punk rock and post-punk. As I say, I need to approach Mill Street elliptically because it's changed an awful lot, and I don't think I can really take it, but we're going to take our first glimpse of it now. So it's not like I haven't seen it, it's just I've been here for 8 years. It hasn't changed much in the last 8 years, but it changed a lot about 20 years ago. So this is Mill Street from the far end. It joins Taff Street, Pontypridd's main drag, and it has changed so much. And before we get down there, we're going to go across the road behind me and approach it from a different angle. And then we'll go down the left-hand side and then back up the right-hand side. I'm going to talk to you about my Autobiogeography of Mill Street, the Psychogeography of Mill Street, its meaning to me. Before approaching Mill Street proper, I just want to do a shot here, and the white buildings there, that's where the co-op used to be, and the co-op led through into Market Street, and it was basically like an arcade, and at the end there was, I seem to remember, a big glass window on the far side of that building through which you would see things like this. And across there you'll see the building behind it, it says PAMS, the red and green building, and I'm sure that was a, or maybe it's the purple bricks outlet next to it, that was a stamp shop, philately, and I can remember that being a marvellous little place, but it's not the sort of place that a town like Pontypridd could support now. Okay, so I've crossed the road and I'm going to approach Mill Street from behind, as it were, heading now towards the first underpass I ever encountered as a youth, and the only underpass I knew for many years. And of course, underpasses, you immediately think of the music of the late 70s and early 80s, the electronica. John Foxx's Balladian Underpass, Burning Car, of Robert Rental and the Normal, Warm Leatherette, of Joy Division, Love Will Tear Us Apart. I say this underpass to me was quite a strange place. It was a science fiction space. It didn't have all these murals then, I don't think. And of course now I think of A Clockwork Orange, and I had a VHS bootleg of Clockwork Orange in the early 80s, which I used to sort of lend out to all the skinheads and things around town, and I had a Clockwork Orange t-shirt. And before that they always wanted to beat me up, but you know, they got quite chummy with me then, so you know, that was quite funny. Again, one thinks of the past, and I think of the underpass leads to Hopkinstown, where I used to go out with a girl called Claire, who's I'm still in touch with. She's on Facebook, and she'll probably still watch this. And it reminds me of a night in Hopkinstown, particularly. And I also attended a dance there. I say a dance, a disco, whatever you would call it, at a hall. And it was around about the time that Ian Curtis died, and Love Will Tear Us Apart was in the charts. And I was rather enamoured of a lady who worked in the Quick Save supermarket at Taft Street. And she was dark-haired. I can just about remember her name. And she just split up with her boyfriend. I was quite keen. I knew a friend of hers. Never sort of happened, but I danced with her to Love Will Tear Us Apart. And she was wearing a gleaming white silk blouse, a tight black miniskirt. She was narrow of hip, but top heavy, in the sort of Russ Meyer way, an enchanting combination. So again, you know, one's desires are formed in those years, you know, and people don't like to talk about it, but it's still there, and the memories still linger, and they become fictions. You embroider, they become bigger. Lost chances. The building on my immediate right, I always remember, was some sort of men's working club or something there. Now I think it's a hostel of some kind. And, you know, one of the problems with shop fronts today is they've all got these really ugly sort of pull down metal grills on them, presumably because of ram raiding and what have you. This used to be like a really nice little street. There was a barber here that was all red leather and the pole outside, and I used to go have my hair cut there, which I hated. I hated to get my hair cut as a kid. And there was like a little kiosk in the front where you could buy something for the weekend. Not that I was that age then. So that was one of the places I didn't like going. But you know, it was more attractive than what's here now. Round about here, possibly this shop here, I would say probably is this one, I can't be certain, was I think the toy shop. And this has taken me aback, because this is the new bookshop, Storyville Books, and I thought this was on the other side of the road, so that's quite interesting. So it might have been this building, it may have been the one next to it. So maybe it was in the Age Connects, but there used to be a toy and model shop there, which was small and dark, had loads of great toys, and I used to go in there and buy lots of sort of Universal Monsters, Aurora Plastics model kits, you know, King Kong, Hunchback of Notre Dame, the Phantom of the Opera, Creature from the Black Lagoon. There was a set, about 12 of them. Godzilla was one of the outliers, and there was a witch, which wasn't a Universal monster, and there was the Forgotten Prisoner of Castlemare, which was an odd one, but they were mostly the Universal monsters: Dracula, Frankenstein, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. And I think I also bought my copy of Dennis Gifford's Pictorial History of the Horror Movie there, so that was really important for me. So like the County Cinema, where I saw Where Dinosaurs Rule the Earth, this was an important part of my early imagination. I've just been in Storyville Books here. I was going to film in there, but the young lady wasn't sure whether the owner would mind. But it's very, very nice and very good. And a lot of sort of small indie bookshops are very twee, but they actually had some good range. So I bought a book funnily enough, by a friend of mine who's from Pontypridd, about the history of the music scene in Ponty. And I'll show you that in a still, which I'll clip into the video. And as I say, this is where my imagination began, really. Round the corner I saw Dinosaurs Ruled the Earth by J.B. Ballard. There was the toy shop where I used to get my models. There was the barber, which I hated. And further down there was something else. Now this EE and BT shop here, funnily enough, my mate Jules Burt, who's got a really good YouTube channel, I think he works for EE, I probably shouldn't say that, so I have to cut this out. But this used to be the electricity board shop here in the corner, and maybe it was here where Halifax was. It was in this area, and I remember going in there with my mum one day, and she was paying the electricity bill, and it was a big open showroom, and they had a wire spinner, a revolving stand with LPs in it, and I bought for £1 Ennio Morricone's A Fistful of Dollars, and for a few dollars more, and both films had just been on TV for the first time. So that sort of ties in with what I was saying earlier on about the Prince of Wales cinema in Cardiff, where they showed nothing but, you know, erotic softcore films, and then one night they showed a load of spaghetti westerns. And it was about that time that I saw Fistful and For a Few Dollars More. So my sort of love of Italy and Italian culture begins here in Pontypridd, with my copy of Fistful of Dollars and For a Few Dollars More. Walking back up Mill Street now, and Mill Street used to be like a P, the letter P. There's a building that's completely gone from the end, and just along here there used to be a wimpy bar. It was an old sort of style in the 70s, this is. Old sort of style, proper wimpy bar, very much sort of Airstream futurist Cadillac finned emporium, and it was round about here. And I can still remember the taste of the fries, the milkshakes in proper tall glass. Sadly very, very, very long gone. That had gone probably by the time I was about 12 or 13. And also there was a Chinese takeaway here, which was known as Sweaty Betty's, and that's long gone as well. And as I say here, this empty space we're coming into now, there was a building here. So if you drove to the end where the underpass is, you then had to drive in a circle, or a square really, around it, and you would go around the back of the building, which is now no longer here, and the road would pop out here. So I still can't get used to this space. That building went a very long time ago. It's at least 20, maybe 30 years ago, but I cannot get used to this space. So that's Mill Street, where my imagination began. Desire for lovely young Welsh girls, Aurora Plastics model kits, books about horror cinema, The Barber, Ennio Morricone, the Psychogeography of Mill Street. It will never ever be the same again.